Grinding is often considered to be the lowest part of a video game, and when a title has gone off the rails in the worst possible way. And as we've talked about in the past, it can happen when a game just is no longer moving the player or motivating them to keep going. But for today, we're going to talk about when games are built explicitly around grinding and how to kind of get the right attitude or right design around it. When it comes to grinding in video games, we can describe or define this phenomenon as when the player essentially loses all ways or forms of progression down to only a few set options. Anything else the player does is not going to move them along. We've seen this in many MMO designs, when the player runs out quests to do and they must just keep killing normal enemies. We've seen this in RPGs when there's no way to get around a boss other than just to level up 5 to 10 more times. And we've seen this in many kinds of strategy, idle, city building, or any kind of objective-based game when the game tells the player that you must do this in order to unlock the next chain of events or story, and all this other gameplay doesn't matter. And when a game gets to that point of grinding, it kills just any momentum. It's when a game transitions from being fun or enjoyable to just being work. But as we said at the start, there are games and genres designed entirely around this sense of grinding. That you have a specific task and you have to just keep doing it until something new unlocks. We've seen this with everything from Minecraft, Factorio, the sheer number of idle games, Cookie Clicker, Clicker Heroes, and again, the list goes on and on. But like we said, there are games that make use of grinding, and it works. Again, people love Factorio. And as I guess a brief spoiler, the footage that we're going to be showing later is of the game Forager. But why do those games succeed where others don't? And that's the fascinating part for our discussion today. When we look at games that are inherently built on grinding, this is where the player is forced to repeat a task or have a very long-term goal that is usually set around repeating the same loop. Gather 50 ore to then unlock mining, or to unlock blacksmithing. Have to keep repeating the science machine in Factorio in order to unlock the next tech. And in Forager's case, the entire game is just built on, well, a never-ending grind of experience and gold in order to unlock more perks, to unlock more things to build, to then unlock more islands, which has more content, and we repeat. And even the more basic idle games like Cookie Clicker and Clicker Heroes fall along those same lines. You're literally clicking again and again and again, watching a number go up so you can unlock something to make that number go up faster. But when it works, it is essentially progression, like we've talked about before, distilled down. But when a game is built entirely on grinding versus when a game becomes a grind are two different elements. And like I said, we're going to have to use several game footages for this video. So to talk about the right way of grinding, we're going to do a quick switch over to Forager, and then we're going to talk about when games go wrong when it comes to grinding. But let's get to that footage now. So here is the footage of Forager that we did during our live stream play of it. And from my review, I described Forager as kind of an elevated idle game. This is a game that, again, it is built on very basic forms of progression. The more experience I get, the more levels I earn, which lets me unlock more perks here. Those perks in turn allow me to do more things in the world here, which earns me more experience. Or I earn gold, which I can then use to apply to the various land. And it's a very simple loop in terms of progress. But there's several reasons why this works, and it gets at this talk about the right kind of grinding. The first point is that the player knows what they're going for. What that means is, as I'm playing this game, I know every one of my little sub-goals. I just farm or I grind to get that key build so I can unlock this treasure chest, which in turn gives me a new reward. When I'm going after things to construct or land, I'm doing this with the explicit purpose to get the materials I need to unlock new gear or to get those new perks. And when I get those new perks, it gets me something new. And I hope you kind of caught the pattern there, that when I'm playing Forager, everything that I'm doing is rewarding me with something new. It's not just me going up in scale. That's a very big point that a lot of idle-based games tend to fail on, which we'll be talking about in our next section here. But Forager, Factorio, and other games that I'm failing to remember off the top of my head, what they did is that you are grinding resources, but you are grinding with the express purpose or the intended purpose to do something new with them. And this is another major point that a lot of idle games tend to mess up on, is that the point of grinding or idling isn't to make the player idle some more. It's to figure out ways to reduce or mitigate that grind so that I can do something else. With Forager here, the beauty of it is that every time I unlock a new piece of gear, that expands my gameplay potentials, or it mitigates some of the previous grind that I was dealing with. You're not going to see this in this footage, but later in the game, you'll unlock vaults or banks that will automatically produce money for you. Now, when you do that, that completely removes the need of you to spend time grinding or minting money at your anvil. You're still dealing with that grind or the requirement of getting more money, but how you achieve that becomes better as you play the game. This is a big point that even some survival games tend to mess up on, or I don't like about them. That you're always in need of essentially tier 1 resources, and there's no other way to gather them. So you have to repeat the same grinding process again and again, even if you are 10, 15, 20 hours in. This was the beauty of, again, something like Subnautica or Factorio, that once you are set up or you're established, a lot of that basic day-to-day minutia or the tedium gets mitigated or it gets taken out completely. In Subnautica, for instance, once you've established an undersea base, you can start to charge items for power, so you don't need to construct batteries anymore. You can set up tanks to give you food, so all the survival aspects get taken care of, allowing you to focus on the next task or the next gameplay loop. And like I said, this is this kind of stuff that it sounds very simple in practice, but it takes a very smart design and gameplay loop to implement it perfectly. And Forager here is probably the most recent example of doing this perfectly. Like I said, even if I'm grinding, I know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and if there is a task that feels tedious in this game, eventually I will come up with a way or will unlock to remove that tedium. A good example of that is how sand works. You see those little traps in the water to the right of my character? That at the beginning is the only way to get sand. Sand is used for glass or bottle making, which you need for several advanced resources as well as some challenges. It's a very slow process defined by RNG, and it sucks. And for very good reason. Because eventually you will unlock the ability to dig with a shovel. Digging automatically will remove parts of the ground and will allow you to look for artifacts that can be used for more money, and it also has a chance of producing sand. But guess what? There's additional upgrade that you can unlock that guarantees sand whenever you use your shovel. So as you get further into the game, that one source of tedium gets completely removed, so you can then concentrate on the task at hand. And it's brilliant. The more you do in the game, the more things get unlocked, which then gives you more content, and it just keeps growing and growing. Stardew Valley is another great example of this. Whenever I do something in that game, I know that I am getting a short-term benefit, but I am also building towards the long term. And as I play the game, the stuff that I used to do becomes easier, and it gives way to new things. And when this works, and again, it's a very short gameplay loop, but it can just be kept being built upon and built upon until you reach the end. And I think that's another major point, that there has to be an end. The light at the end of the tunnel must exist, or people are just going to get tired of playing it. And to show that off, we're going to switch to some footage of another game that did not work as well, I think, with the grinding. But first, a quick shout out to our Patreon supporters and backers. And now for a quick thank you to our Patreon supporters and current Game Wisdom sponsors. If you would like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, linked down below. So here we've switched to footage of Swag and Sorcery. This is the latest game from Lazy Bear Games, who their past titles have all been kind of built around this essence of grinding. And while they've certainly gotten that down pat, they fail to, I think, understand what makes grinding work. Now, with the game here, this is built heavily inspired by the game Weapon Shop Fantasy, and I think the game Dragoncliff as well. But the core gameplay loop is we send characters out into the world to get resources, we bring those resources back to the town, and then we craft new gear with the intent of either selling it or equipping it to our characters so they become better, so we can then send them out and do more stuff. It's a very engaging core gameplay loop, as evident by the other games where it worked. But the problem with Swag and Sorcery is that they fail to understand that grinding needs to serve a purpose, a legitimate goal for the player to achieve. And when it doesn't achieve that, it just becomes a job and very frustrating to play. The problem with the game is that everything that you do is tied to grind. In order to get more resources, we have to wait for a battle or a mission to end. Then we have to take those resources and refine them. That takes more time. When I have to send characters out to get healed, I either spend money or I have to grind for that. Money is also the only way to level them up. Not only that, but when you're trying to craft new gear, the game does a double grind by sometimes requiring the same resource as the prerequisite for the equipment, and also to be used in a secondary resource, which, guess what? That requires more grinding and processing as well. It all just repeats again and again without any semblance of a light at the end of the tunnel. Again, with something like Forager and Factorio and the like, when I'm grinding or going after a task, I know that there is an end to that. I know it's going to unlock something. And then that something is going to be either a brand new element, or it's going to make what I've done easier. The problem that Swag and Sorcery has is that the grind just continues to scale. What I'm doing in the level 1 area is the same in the level 10, which is the same in the level 20, and the only thing that's changing are the numbers. And unfortunately, that just becomes monotonous, because as the player, I can't do anything more. I'm basically completely engaged with the core gameplay loop. It's just a matter of repeating it again and again. And while that is very engaging, again, this design works well, they are missing the point as to where this should all lead. Not only that, but as you get further in, you unlock a library, which they hinted at unlocking more technologies or things to make things easier. Instead, it only unlocks one-time consumable buffs and spells. But the spells have a cost to them, so you have to grind the resources and gold to fill up your mana bar. But the point is that everything just keeps swirling in this state of grind. With the Forager example, like we've said, when I achieve something, I get a reward. I get something that's going to benefit me in the short term and the long term, and that motivates you to go after the next thing. In this game, I unlock something, and guess what? I get more grinding in the process. This is the exact same thing that happened with their previous games, such as Graveyard Keeper. Graveyard Keeper actually joked about one of the quests, instead of rewarding you with a new feature, that they literally just extended the grind to add more to it. And that was just a horrible progression. And Graveyard Keeper was even more guilty of that grinding, because there was never that sense of you unlocking something new. When you complete a quest, the person says, "Thank you for giving this to me. Now here's 5 more things that I want." And every time you get a new quest, it just becomes more work. It's not just you having to gather the resources. You need to unlock the technology to do that. So you need to gather the right kind of experience. There were 3 different experience currencies. So you have to grind that out. And then once you finish that, you then have to grind the actual task. And it just got to the point that there was no light at that end of the tunnel. Even idle games such as Cookie Clicker and Clicker Heroes and the like, they give you a reward. Yes, that reward unlocks the next sense of grinding or the next idle thing, but you can see that you're making progress. It's not just scaling things up, even though that is the bulk of the core gameplay loop. But again, the very best examples will give you something, and then it will make things better or reduce the previous grind. A lot of survival-based games, as we've seen in the past, will frequently force you to grind out Tier 1 resources. Again, Don't Starve being a really good example. But when you're trying to convince the player to keep playing and to keep going, you have to throw them a bone. And with Swag and Sorcery here, and Graveyard Keeper, and so on, there is no sense of reward. There's no meaningful progression. And to me, that's when things go horribly wrong when it comes to grinding. I can play a game like Forager till the cows come home because I'm constantly not only being rewarded, but I can see what's coming next. I know that I am building towards something. It's the same thing in Stardew Valley. That once I unlock that new building or that new sword or whatever, I can then immediately use that and get a major benefit. In this game, I could spend 10 to 15 minutes grinding out resources to build a new sword or a new piece of gear, and it may not be better than what my character is currently using. Or the reward for doing it may just be minuscule. If you look on the left-hand side where you see those quests, that quest log, the quest can sometimes give random rewards. Okay, but if I get something that I don't need, then I just wasted my time and I wasted that quest slot. And the idle genre is very weird like that. You don't want the player to feel like they're wasting their time playing an idle game. The whole point of the idle is to convince them that they're not wasting their time. I know, it's like a funky little magic trick there. But to begin to wrap things up for our video, grinding works when the player not only knows that they are going for a goal, but that there is a reward for it. Not just in terms of more grinding, but something to either mitigate previous grind or to unlock something new. And when we say new, we don't mean scaling. Again, if you look at Swag and Sorcery here, there are 6 areas of varying levels of difficulty. That's not changing what I'm doing. Just because my character is hitting for 500 points of damage instead of 50, that means nothing to me. Because they're just doing the same exact thing and I'm just doing the same exact thing. It just takes more time to complete that task. And the player should not feel like they're being pigeonholed into only having one form of progression. In this game, gold is the only way for characters to level up. They will not gain any other stat points regardless. So, if I spend like 20 minutes crafting all manner of goods or resources, that means nothing unless I have goods to sell. Where in Weapon Shop Fantasy, by simply having my character work at the smith or wherever the station is, they will get stat improvements, which I can then apply to when they go out into the field. And when they go into the field, they may level up, getting further stats, which, guess what? That gets applied to when they're back at the weapon shop. Again, everything I'm doing should be moving the player forward. I should not be stuck or going backwards. Swag and Sorcerer makes another very big mistake. If you retreat or your party wipes, you lose progress on top of the resources that those characters are carrying. So that is not right for this kind of design. Again, the player should not feel like they are wasting their time in an idle game, because when they do, then the wheels have fallen off the wagon. But thank you so much for watching this video. For those of you watching this, can you think of games that made grinding enjoyable other than the ones that we've mentioned? And can you think of titles that just went too far in terms of grind? And to make things interesting, the mobile free-to-play genre doesn't count here, because everyone will just pick like the same few games. But thanks for tuning in. Be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, take care. If you're looking for a book on design, my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, is out now. It is available where most books are sold, and it comes in paper, hardcover, or digital copies. This is the perfect book for anyone interested in learning about game design, whether you are a student, enthusiast, or just a fan. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoy things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below, where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.